You're listening to Peel Good, a marketing podcast. I'm your returning host, Emily Knowles, the client account manager for Clementine Creative Agency. And today I'm joined with the social media manager of Clementine, Caroline Johns. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Of course. I mean, this is your third time, so I feel like you should be a pro at this by this point.
I wouldn't say pro, but...
I mean, things have kind of changed since you last were on the mic.
Exactly.
But I feel like that's in theme with our topic today because marketing is ever changing, it's ever evolving, and I feel like one of those signature sayings that kind of float around the marketing industry is that change is the only constant in marketing, and we kind of see that, and though it can be referenced to many things that fall under that marketing umbrella, we can really narrow it down and start from technology at the beginning of its time and how marketing has flowed through those different advances in technology, starting with kind of like radio and radio commercials, and then came along cable TV, and then advertisements transitioned from radio and radio commercials to television and television commercials. And now nobody has cable anymore. You don't have cable. I know that, right?
Exactly. No. Yep. We have YouTube TV. So, and, following that path, now it's social media. It's, marketers have to always kind of change up where they're targeting their audience. And the audiences are always changing where they're on.
Yeah. Exactly. And marketers have to kind of meet those audiences where they're at. Like you're saying, like we went from then cable TV to where people kind of cut that cable out and are now streaming or now just turning to social for their, either information. And that's where marketers are meeting those people to be able to continue to advertise and sell product or news or events, whatever it may be. So you mentioned social media, which is great. And if we kind of narrowed down on social media and how it evolves, so we looked at this bigger marketing umbrella and the constant technology changes that led us to social. But if we narrow it down and focus on social itself has kind of evolved in many ways from platform to platform and features on platforms where advertisers and marketers adjusted there to meet the audience. Right. So tell me something like what is something that marketers should be focusing on when it comes to social media as it evolves?
That's a good question. I think kind of always staying on your toes and keeping up and ahead of the trends is the number one thing, because there's always going to be a new trend. There's always going to be a new feature. And like we're talking, social media now wears the hat of kind of this evolving nature of marketing in the digital realm. So always staying on top of what's new and what's fresh and where kind of following your audience, but get there before they do.
Right. And I think we even have to take a look at all the platforms out there and make sure you're on the right platforms. So as we're in this digital age now, and social media, as you said, is wearing the hat for all of that. And where it goes towards marketing and who they're advertising to, you want to spend time on fewer platforms but more relevant platforms. And so we've seen that there's few platforms that have really prevailed through time, whereas like maybe not the vines of platforms, they haven't necessarily kind of made it through its course, but we still have Instagram, we still have Facebook definitely always been a pioneer, and it's Instagram to follow, LinkedIn, Twitter, now TikTok being the most recent that's kind of been in this relevant space. So if we look at platforms and how it's necessary to stay on those and kind of the evolving features within those platforms specifically, what are some of those key takeaways that marketers need to know as those things evolve?
I think number one, you have to know where your audience lies, to know that you're targeting the right platform, and to know that you know the ins and outs of that platform and what kind of advertising features that they offer.
Right.
And as platforms evolve and shift, so do marketers.
Right.
So I think always staying on top of your strategies and, like I said, being ahead of your audience to know where they're going to go next, so you can already be ready to target them and be where they are and meet them.
I think it's funny that you said earlier, well, it's ironic that, marketers have to be ahead of the trends, but sometimes it's funny that platforms themselves aren't ahead of the trends. They just kind of copy the trends. But because they're more prevailing, they kind of take on this like more central role for it all. So like Instagram, for example, Snapchat kind of started this stories feature. They kind of were the pioneers for that. And then you had Instagram and Facebook to follow, and they kind of implemented stories on their platform. And then Twitter, I think, dabbled in a minute. I don't think it stayed there, but we see Instagram stories are one of the main features now offered on Instagram. And many people turn to that rather than flipping through their feed, which is the original Instagram feature. Exactly. But ads there, now you're seeing story ads pop up.
Yep. And it's it goes with the whole evolving nature. It's like, what's going to be next? But I think it's knowing like what's new and what's fresh,
right.
and also being ahead of your competitors, and doing bigger and better than they are. So you're getting it more in front of your audience and the right audience to meet your goals and objectives.
Exactly. It's like marketers need to be ahead of their competitors, but platforms are keeping in pace with their competitors or even copying their competitors. Because say on Instagram, again, the kind of Reels feature that came up to be about in the last 2 years kind of followed that TikTok, feature or its main platform purpose, and kind of took it on as its own in features now for Instagram, which is kind of prevailing in its own. I don't think it's necessarily outdone TikTok, but it's definitely making its way as its own type of feature within the app.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of the Instagram stories topic, because I feel like that's almost a platform in itself.
True.
There's this new thing that's unspoken, but it's advertising is kind of heading into paid word of mouth, so to speak. So you look at micro-influencers and, larger influencers. It doesn't matter the following, or they can be a vlogger, but brands are starting to target and partner with those people to have a more authentic approach to their advertising campaigns. So, it's not so in your face that this is an ad,
right?
But it's knowing that those partners that those brands are partnering with have an authentic tone already, and they have a super loyal following, and that is where you're going to exceed and excel when you're targeting on social media specifically, because there's so much competition in the platform, and just through the digital age of people making money on social media, that's where advertising is heading. And it's new and different, but it's paid word of mouth, basically.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think, again, about how meeting your audience where they are. So you see the audience are kind of, if influencers, micro-influencers, they have these large followings, so your audience is there and looking at they choose to follow those people or those brands. And so that a marketer is going to utilize them in order to then sell their product or what have you. I think the same for TikTok. TikTok at its start was just entertaining videos and quick entertaining videos. And now you have people on there who kind of came into their own on TikTok and became influencers on TikTok. They're now selling products in a more native advertising way, where they're using the entertainment spot of a video to the whole time selling a product. And that itself, your audience is now on TikTok. It's now on this new platform that has billions of users.
Right.
And people are on up to 3 hours a day. And you can utilize that audience through those TikTok influencers that have now come to be. So that's a great point.
And it's, the word of mouth, it's hard sometimes to try to find that right person that's in your niche and is going to reach your audience perfectly.
Right.
And also it's, their followers, they've built up this sense of loyalty where they know that if this, they see it's an ad and they're like, oh, okay, but in a subtle way, but knowing that they can trust this person, like, oh, I'm sure that they trust this brand, so I want to trust this brand.
Yeah.
So it's just it's almost selling your brand instead of your product sometimes is what it really comes down to, and focusing on selling your brand, not your products.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to make the note, or to, differentiate between influencer and micro-influencer, because you talk about trust, and that's how you can really take a person and their following and turn, revenue, essentially, because that's the end goal. For someone who may be a blogger that you followed for a long time, and you saw them at the start where they weren't even making money off their blogging, but now that they've kind of come into their own and they actually do like product reviews and things like that, and now someone's paid them to do a product review, you will trust their review, even though you're getting paid, they're getting paid for it.
Exactly.
Whereas like someone who is a mega influencer with 100 million followers, so to speak, that you're less likely to look at those type of influencers. But again, that's the evolving right there. It's the evolving of knowing there's a difference in influencer and micro-influencers, and who those marketers are going to now gear towards, of who their audience trusts most.
Right. And it's the influencer themselves kind of have to ask the question, and brands themselves, how can you be subtle and go about this subtly so people don't get turned off by ads in your face all the time on social media, and they're now, your favorite bloggers on Instagram are just ad after ad after ad, and it's going to become, it's going to weaken their loyalty base with their followers.
Yeah, it kind of follows that same track of native advertising is essentially what it is, and you can go back and listen to our episode on native advertising, but that being, you're kind of coming onto the platform and integrating what you would usually post in conjunction with what you're selling. But you're doing it so subtly and so authentically, that's what's selling to your audience, more so than a very markety, gimmicky type approach. And marketers themselves, when they know who to use for those purposes and who not to use to reach the audience and how they feel about that.
Right.
Now, when we talk about evolve in marketing and marketers meeting their audience where they are, we also know that with the age of social media and how far it's evolved, people start to have a concern with their privacy on social media. So what would you say to the fact that marketers have to also meet their audience in their privacy concerns that they have from social media?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to trust and loyalty and being authentic, and just creating an air about your brand that, anyone's going to want to trust you and knows your brand, knows your mission, stands behind you and what you value as a brand, and just, building a brand that they trust, that the audience trust, and not so much building a follower base or focusing on sales. Just really building a loyal brand that everyone knows and trust. I think trust is a big thing on social media, and especially with privacy concerns. And it's hard sometimes to combat that. But I think just, if you are going to do micro-influencer, macro-influencer partnerships, just really gearing toward that, who has the most loyal fan base. What's their engagement like, and really looking at all of those keys to it to know that, whoever sees this ad is not going to be worried about those concerns of privacy. Right.
Well, and on the flip side of that, we talk how marketers can face the concerns of consumers. On the flip side of that, because digital media has become like a minefield of advertising now, and that kind of has turned people away from it or turned people off of it. Like, for instance, TikTok being its entertainment video was its central. Now it's kind of flooded with advertisements as well. Some people were turned off from that. So there has been this new privacy that's taken place, at least through Apple and its iOS updates, where marketers can't target that audience as much because they're screening more privacy for those users. So they don't feel as violated through digital marketing and their choice of being on social media.
Right.
What would you say to marketers who are combating that new technique?
Be patient.
Yeah.
Because it's, like we said, change happens. It's going to happen. Everything is evolving. And just be patient with the process, because if people trust your brand and love what you're selling and love your mission, they're going to want to follow you and they're going to want to support you. So just keep doing what you're doing, and the success will follow you.
Right. And I think it's a good way for us as marketers at our core who want to be creative to become creative in this new atmosphere of privacy for users. And we kind of have taken on, like you said, it's change is the only constant, is what we said at the beginning of this. And so like you said, we're used to that. That's what marketers do. We know marketing is ever evolving. So this change in privacy isn't necessarily a surprise. Though it is something we now have to adjust our strategy for, and that allows us to be more creative and come up with more ways that we can still reach our audience that complies with this new privacy policy. So what would be some closing words for a marketer who's like, how can I look at my marketing strategy to know that through evolving social media and what could come from this evolvement, maybe it's not even just social anymore. What if there's a new social? Like, what would be that new social? What is something you would tell to that marketer to place for their strategy moving forward?
I think the biggest thing, and I'll go back to something I've already said, is focus on selling who you are and not what you sell or what you are. really get to the core of these are our values, these are our missions, and this is what we're sticking to, and follow that through and be authentic in your ads also. You don't always have to sell. It's not all about sell. Just create that sense and air of authenticity in your brand and you'll thrive.
I agree with that. And I agree because I think if you can have the trust in your brand and its messaging and the storytelling of your brand, no matter what changes come in marketing, that will follow through whatever the change is.
Exactly.
Because products will change, products will come and go. People who like the product will come and go. But at your core, who your brand is and the messaging behind that brand will stay through the evolvement of marketing. So always staying true to that and always making sure that's what you have put your trust in and you would want to sell to someone over the specific product that you're selling. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And one more thing, I think it's so important to always be on top of the trends and always stay up to date with your strategy and try new things. Like, don't be afraid to go out of the box, and if you've never done a story ad, test it and see how it does, or try partnering with a brand or partnering with an influencer and see what the results are, because you might be pleasantly surprised.
Exactly. I know a lot of people were hesitant about TikTok and its whereabouts and maybe marketing on that, but I've seen, you know, a lot of people have come to success through that. And a lot of the word of mouth marketing there has taken off from people doing organic product reviews and whatnot, and then on cheese, and now cheese is sold out at supermarkets. So I think you're right. Trying new things, staying on top of those trends and ahead of those trends, as we know marketing is moving forward at the speed of light. And who's to say what's next? So I guess we'll just have to find out and hope that, you know, as it's moving, we're moving with it, and not to stay in this current age and get attached to it and married to this idea of where we're at now, so that we're ready for that adjustment moving forward.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Caroline. That was, I feel like, a very productive conversation.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course.